Hey folks, today we are working with the bowl lather again, just like I did yesterday. And yesterday was loading with a 1/4 teaspoon of the soap. And the soap is Chiseled Face, Midnight Stag. As far as I know, this is their OG base. It says silk amino acids as the last ingredient. And I've got some older tubs that say silk powder. I don't know if it was a different formulation or if those are two things that mean the same. So I've asked Ron about that through his Contact Us page. Ron, who is the Chiseled Face guy. I've also tagged him on a Reddit post, but I have yet to get a response to find out about that. This is the soap, and as you can kind of see, I scraped around the sides to get that 1/4 teaspoon amount. And we discovered yesterday that that was twice, easily 2 or 3 times as much lather as I needed. And so in the future, if I were to choose to keep with the scooping method, then I could just reduce the amount I scoop to maybe half or just a little bit more than half of that 1/4 teaspoon measure. So 1/8 of a teaspoon or maybe a little bit more. And that's good because then you know that your soaps are going to go a long way. It's also good because when you have a small sample that you've received from a vendor or a friend, these little guys, you always wonder how many shaves can I get out of this. You want to try the scent, be able to really get to know it. And so let's not waste that soap. And so once you find out, hey, if this soap base was the same as the Chiseled Face one, then I would know that I could use less than a 1/4 teaspoon, and I'd be able to get a lot of shaves out of that sample. So that's good. But once you do buy a big old tub, like Sterling, for instance, almost 6 ounces of soap, and man, it goes a long way. Then you don't have to necessarily measure it as closely because it really does go so far. Unless you're really hard up for money, its soap is pretty cheap. So you don't have to measure it quite as diligently if you don't want to, especially if you have a big soap collection like me. Today, let's change and not use the scooping method. Obviously, the scooping method has a great benefit in that the soap does not get it stays less contaminated. It's only as contaminated as your scoop ever is, right? You don't get water in your soap because you're scooping from it. But I think most people, me included, like to brush load right from the tub. And so that's what we're going to do today. And let's look at the other pieces of the puzzle here. We have the Semogue Owners Club with a Taj handle. This is my little yogurt cup that is the perfect size for soaking brushes. And because it tilts in just a little bit at the top, it keeps the brush handles more vertical than other cups. And so I found that to be the perfect little reusable, repurposing type thing. The Timeless Open Comb Stainless Steel Razor is what I'm using, and it is the 68 gap. And here's the Nacet blade with its markings and dents. You can tell it's a 68 on one of the ends. It'll have 68 on there. And 68 is the gap measurement in millimeters. Actually, it's in 100th millimeters. 100th of a millimeter. All right, so that's ready to go. The Nacet, the blade that I'm using, has had this many uses. I may be off by one. Sometimes at the end of the shave, I forget to come back and put a dot. So we're either on shave number 592. The title of the video will have the correct count number and the description of the video as well. So let us get my my face wet in preparation of loading, and then that will also soften my beard a little bit to help with the shave. For pre-shave, there are plenty of products out there. The shaving companies definitely want to take your money. And many of the bigger companies, they want to take your money and make you think you need something that you don't. That happens less with the smaller artisan makers because they just in general have maybe a little bit more integrity. But a pre-wash, pre-shave wash kind of thing with a glycerin soap could be a good idea for you. Glycerin soap does a great job of preparing your face for the shave. So glycerin soap is very advisable, and it can even be found at the Dollar Tree, pretty cheap. Or you can, of course, you can go out there and buy something high-end, whatever makes you feel good and fits your budget. Go ahead and do that. Just don't use an exfoliating soap like I talked about yesterday, because the shave itself is very exfoliating, and you could cause irritation by exfoliating too much. All right, so with the face damp and so the hairs are that way, we're going to load right from the bowl. I have a brush here, another one. Let's say you go with a dry load. With a bore brush, you do need to soak it beforehand, at least 3-4 minutes. I like to soak mine 10 or more. But anything beyond maybe 20 is probably unnecessary. But it's not going to hurt the brush as long as you are not soaking in hot water. And as long as you're not, with this wood handle, I would not want to have the water level be above the knot. I don't want to get it waterlogged. But if you, after you soak the brush, if you want to come and load, and you can even squeeze all the water out of your brush and load, and that would be kind of a dry brush loading method. I found that doesn't really pick up soap as easily. And so it takes longer to load, and it's a little bit harder to understand, to figure out how much you're loading, but that's a valid technique if you want to do it that way. With synthetics, of course, they're so stiff that they will often pick up soap nicely in that situation. The dry load has one benefit. You impart less water into the soap, and for people who kind of have OCD worries, they are going to think that makes them feel better because there's less chance of mold. And while that is true, there's less chance. I've got so many soaps, and I use a really wet method, and I just never come up against soap in my mold in my soap, and it's just an inhospitable place for mold to grow. So it's so unlikely that I just don't worry about it. I've also tried taking my brush and have it saturated, just so much water, and there are certain soap bases that don't respond well to that much water. The water almost gets in the way of the tips gathering up soap. And so I've loaded for a lot. I think Cella, the Italian soap, is one that I was trying, and I really loaded up my soap brush with water, just scientific curiosity, and it just took so long to load. It was very fascinating. So just somewhere inside of those extremes is where I would advise. Not crazy wet, but not super dry. But super dry will still work. You just have to figure it out for yourself there. It just takes a little bit longer sometimes. So a way to accomplish that with what a lot of people do is they'll take their brush out of their soap cup, or after they've run it under some water, and then give it a couple of shakes. And so right now it's very, very wet. You can still see it's dripping. Choose how many shakes you want to give it. Might be a good way to kind of control how much water is in your brush at the start. We'll just give, I'd say this is still a very wet brush, but it's not going to just dump a ton of water in my soap as I go here. I know from experience that about 15 swirls in this soap is going to give me plenty of lather. And so that's what I'll do today. That'll probably still give me more than I need as the water continues to build up in the soap. 15 swirls gives me a little bit of water in the soap, and I'm going to pour that out into my bowl. You could put it down the sink. I mean, it's probably not going to matter too much, but and then if you're worried about soap on the side, I just put that on my face. If you get a lot of lather in the threads there of the container, I just turn it upside down and then rinse, have water poured down. I got to keep those threads clean, and then yeah, see, we've got some bubbles right there. So just Rinse those off, and then they won't build up and cause problems fastening the lid later on. All right, so this is a tutorial, kind of, oriented more for beginning shavers. And then this time is going to be bowl lathering using the simple standard bowl today as well, for just to show you it doesn't matter. Yesterday was the same thing, but we were loading we scooped, and then we pressed that soap into the bottom of this bowl. And then now we loaded with the loaded right from the tub. And just like yesterday, we get kind of that airy, bubbly stuff right away, and that's all right. If you get a lot of that stuff right away, one thing to do is start adding water a little more quickly, and it helps to calm that down. As a note, I don't recommend those sriracha bowls. That trend has definitely been mentioned in most of the shaving forums. Those are Japanese grinding bowls, and they have kind of a ceramic inside, and they have ridges that are not glazed. And so they are kind of meant for grinding spices, and I can't think of a brush other than a cheap synthetic that I would want to increase the wear on the tips of my brush. And so that's why I would not recommend that. I think it would, over time, the brush would just, you just start to lose those tips with such an abrasive wall on the bowl. And so you can see it didn't take us too long to get rid of that kind of bubbly mess. This kind of soap has a lot of coconut oil, and so it has a lot, sometimes people call it structure. You can see it holds it, and the reason they do that is because it holds itself up, pretty well. Even in this kind of tall tower scenario. And I'm going to add some more water to that. The other day, I think I added 35 milliliters of water in this type of, lather, and it still wasn't. I think that was about right. Now, I added a lot of water right there. Who knows? This one may be too, this one may be the opposite. It may be too soupy. Good news is it'll all work. Sometimes it's good to take it too wet. Sometimes you discover, ooh, I took it too wet, but I really like it. And it wasn't actually too wet, it was just right. So sometimes it's good to test those extremes. So look at this. This is very different than yesterday's lather because I added water a lot quicker. And so we're already at this kind of a soupy stage. And it's not holding itself up. It's kind of collapsing in. What you're looking at right now, the way this is behaving and its viscosity, is where I like to take most of my soaps, and the better makers will still have a creamy feel, a lightly creamy feel when it looks like this, and then all this water is going to help with the slickness. Now this base and other coconut oil type bases that are a little bit more old school doesn't keep that lightly creaminess when it looks like this, and so I'm not expecting that with this one, but it'll still be serviceable. But makers like Summer Break and Barrister and Mann and Mammoth and Declaration Grooming, they'll work great when you take them to this level of hydration. And sometimes I'm plunging the brush because I want the brush to get nice and saturated with whatever I have in the bowl. And there we go. I think that's a really good lather right there. And look at that. I kept mixing, and see, we were able to incorporate the water into the lather. It's not collapsing like it was before. Just a second ago, you remember? That's because it wasn't homogeneously mixed yet. There was still some loose water hanging around that had not kind of joined in on the emulsion process. And so this, I think this is going to be great. Yeah, look at that. So for this base, I think this is probably perfect. For other bases, I might actually continue adding water to get back to that more fluid level. So I'm going to give my face one more splash with water. If I thought that my lather was a little too dry, I would not give my, too wet, I would not give my face what I just did. Start out with a drier face. If you really overdid it and added too much water to your lather, then dab your face dry before you load, before your passes, and that helps. If your lather is a little too dry on the opposite end of the spectrum there, then you can wet your face and let it be dripping wet when you start to put your lather on. And of course you can dip your tips in water to help hydrate your lather. Yeah, this is definitely not overhydrated. I thought it might be when I dumped all that water in and it was looking so soupy, but see, that did mix in with the soap just right. This is very nice. It's not too drippy. The first pass, I usually like to work the lather into my skin, especially if I haven't washed my face beforehand. The painting strokes serves to even out the lather across your face, but really you only need a tiny microscopic layer of lather on your beard, and so it's kind of unnecessary, but it feels good to me. In terms of just feeling that painting stroke across my face with a nice soft lather, it just feels nice, so I do it. So I was talking about pre-shaves before. One good thing about a pre-shave is if you like the fragrance, if you like the scent of the pre-shave, then that just adds another opportunity to have scent in your shave. And that's enough of a reason to use it, even if it's unnecessary. Most modern shave soaps are going to be plenty slick enough, and so you don't really need to do a pre-shave to add slickness to your face. And so most people don't. If you have super dry skin or just chronically dry skin, that kind of thing, then yeah, your routine may need to change, may need to be a little atypical. Splash of water. But those big companies, they want to get every opportunity to get money from you. And one of the ways that commercials are programmed to work is to generate, and marketing departments, of course, generate a perceived need that their products will fix. And so they're going to tell you that you need a pre-shave for best results. And that's usually just not true. They may offer 3 or 4 different pre-shave options. when you're learning to generate a good lather, I recommend not using a pre-shave so that you learn how to make a good lather. And later on, once you've got your good lathering skills, then use a pre-shave oil if you want. But now you have the skills. Sometimes a pre-shave will compensate for crappy lathers. But if you don't want to learn how to make a good lather and use a pre-shave, and you're like, hey, this is looking enough, I mean, go for it. You know, that's all your choice. So that's 3 passes, I think. So we're good. Yeah, I told you the other day I used 15 swirls and I got 5 or 6 passes of lather, probably more. And I just did 3 passes of shaving, and the bowl still has, 5 passes of lather in it. So you just don't, and why is that? Can you pick up a brand new soap that hasn't been used in a year? Well, I say brand new, but it's either brand new or maybe it's one that you just haven't used in a long time. Is it going to only take 15 swirls of a wet brush to load up like this one did? No, because see, this one has been wet loaded this month. And so the moisture here is built in to the surface of the soap, and so it's going to release itself to the brush a lot more easily. And so you may need to do 30 swirls when you're first starting out. But if you keep using the same soap over and over, then you'll probably find that number of swirls is going to gradually go down. And then if you switch to another soap, you'll start the process over again, come back to this same soap in a year, and you'll it'll dry out enough to where you have to ramp back up and start with a higher number and come on down. And the more soaps you play with, the more you'll realize kind of where that happy medium is. So to sum up, I believe that, yes, I made a ton of lather, so I didn't need to load for as long. Mental note, tomorrow, if I go for loading this same way, 10 swirls might be all I need in the tub to get plenty of lather. So let's do the splash. Chiseled Face Midnight Stag Splash, and the cologne is the same scent as well. So wow, this was a good bowl lather to be an example in terms of a couple of things I like. I did not add water slowly, as you saw. Even I was concerned that second bit of water that I added might have been too much. And it did look very soupy at first, but I just kept mixing because it just wasn't properly mixed yet. It wasn't homogeneous. And guess what happened? You saw it. It not only did it become a little bit more structure, and that's exactly where it needed to be. It gave me a wet protective surface. Skin felt great, and it still had kind of a lightly luxurious nature to it. Feel on the face, not quite as good as other more modern soap bases, but still very good, very serviceable. Does a good job. Cologne here, Midnight Stag. I use it all of August because I'm a fan of the scent. And you saw how it was very soupy at first, the lather, and then but I kept working it, and then it started having its own structure. And so let's look at back, having a little bit more of a structure. So if we pull it back up again, you can see it collapse on itself, but it's not fully devolving into a blob. It's keeping a little bit of its shape, and for this base, I think this is perfect. Is the right consistency to go for. And so if I add water slowly, I would just look for this type of texture, and whenever I had achieved it, I can stop adding water. Or if you figure out the amount to add, and there's some consistency that can happen, you may figure out that with a jigger like this, maybe I can add 25 milliliters of water, and then just some minor tweaking is all that it takes to get it to here. You can do that math if you want, or just kind of memorize it by the looks, and then you don't have to track measurements and things like that. Whatever, if you want to get nerdy with it, you can measure your water and your soap and all that. If you want to be casual and kind of Wild West about it, just keep adding water until it looks like this. Or count the number of shakes like we did in the beginning with the wet brush. You can get it really saturated, and then, okay, 2 shakes. That's all I need. You know, that usually hits me in the right spot. That's another good kind of practical measuring method. So hopefully this is a shave that'll help you guys who may be new to bowl lathering. And there are definitely a lot of people out there who don't know how to do it well. And hopefully this will help. This is Sugar Daddy Shaves. Thanks so much for watching. We continue on with Austere August. Don't quite know what I'm going to do tomorrow, but we'll figure it out. All right, now, take care.